I was going to say thank you to the choir, but they all left. No. Thank you to the choir who are now out there. We take a second and pray with me. God, as we come to your word, as we come into this place where we experience worship, help us surrender. Help me surrender that you might speak through me to all of us gathered here. What we need to hear is what you have to say, and it's not always what we recognize at first. Touch our hearts. Amen. Many of you know why we light the Advent wreath. It's an important thing that we mark our experiences with tokens, with icons and things. We are a tangible people. We're not, all of our lives are not the intangible things. We can talk about the stuff that's intangible mattering, but we have tangible ways of connecting. And the thing that I like about the idea of lighting a candle, about an Advent wreath, is it allows us a place to focus, but it gives us also the breadth of a much bigger concept. So last week we lit the candle for hope. And the second week, it is the candle of the way. Christ is the way. If you remember, and Debbie talked about it last week, I think, that John the Baptist said, I'm preparing the way, calling God's people, prepare a way in the wilderness. And we recognize sometimes that we have a way and then we have our way, and our way is even more focused down to my way, and then my way becomes the way, right? There is a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it. There's the way to do it, and the way not to do it. I've learned a lot of the ways not to do it on many things in my life. And I can tell you that when I go at it from my perspective, with my wisdom and all of the genius and creativity that I have, oftentimes that's when I blow it. And when I don't get outside of myself and let other information come in. And I think it's important that we recognize mystery doesn't always make us uncomfortable. We talk about being awed by mystery. You hear that? Awed by mystery. Mystery, the uncertainty of the things that we don't understand. Yes, we are, as a people, as a species, we are more drawn to things that are familiar than we are to things that are unfamiliar. And we consistently choose a known compromise or a known negative for an unknown blessing or an unknown benefit. So there is a part of mystery that bothers us. But mystery is also, depending on who you ask, either the number one or the number two genre in literature, both in writing and films and media. There's something about mystery that draws us. We have this tension between the notion that mystery is the uncertain and unknown and therefore dangerous thing, and this notion that mystery is in some way takes us to a place that we can't get to. For me, a mystery, and this happens to me all the time, if I'm reading a book or watching a movie, and it's really hard for me, especially if we're watching a movie, as soon as I think I've figured out where it's going, I'm done. I check out of it. I can leave halfway through. Now, that'll leave Lynn watching it till the end because she is absolutely loyal. She'll watch it till the last minute of a movie. But if I'm watching a movie, it's supposed to be a mystery, and I know where it's going. As soon as I think I've figured it out, and I'm not always right, but I don't always stick around to find out that I'm wrong. So as soon as I figured out that I think I know where it's going, that's it. My brain disconnects, and I'm somewhere else. So often, that means that I miss out because it's not just the answer to the mystery that matters. It's also how you get there. It's also how you get there. And I want, as we think this morning, we talked in the first service about Herod's part in this story in Matthew. In this service, I want us to think about the Magi. And I want you to think, when we talk about the Magi, it's interesting. We don't have a lot of information about them. Their very presence is, in fact, a mystery. We call them the Magi. There's some popular tales that give names to them, and that's just stuff that people made up, and that's okay. You can make up all you want to make up. Scripturally, we don't know a lot about these guys. We don't know a lot about where they came from, from the east. It's a pretty big planet to be from the east. It's not, and it was around the time of Jesus' birth. We can talk about how far they can travel and all that sort of stuff. But the truth is, the Magi have left us in mystery. We really don't have much else. There's not a lot of information. Even most of the other events, like Herod as one of the rulers of the Roman Empire, we know a lot about that. Know a lot about him, a lot about other things going on. We don't know much about the Magi. And I want us this morning to just try to step into the space of uncertainty and consider the way the Magi went about this, how they enter into this story in a way that maybe doesn't make sense at first and might never make sense. Allow that there's the possibility of something around this truth of Christmas that you may never be able to fully understand. That's the place where grace starts to work. Our challenge is not that we learn this story perfectly and that we mine all the depths and the history and all the stuff going around, all of the intellectual stuff that surrounds it. We can do that. It's been done. You can spend a lifetime doing it. But when it comes to the gospel, what we don't need is more information. You can't get more about the Christmas story. This is it. We can add to it, we can add tinsel and glitter and everything else, but you can't get more. And if we push for more, if we want to expand, sometimes what happens is we start making stuff up and adding things to it. But the story about the Magi, the story of them coming to Jerusalem and what they're experiencing and what they're questioning, what they're wondering, and how they respond to it, that's all there is. And when grace invades our lives, like Jesus Christ invaded this planet when he was born. And make no mistake, it's an invasion. God is breaking in to the shell that we've constructed. God recognizes that we're not able through law. We like the law. We, for the most part, would like to be lawyers. We'd either like to be making laws or enforcing laws. We like to choose law enforcement or lawmaking. And Jesus has comes to break into that and say, the law doesn't work for you guys because you don't listen to the laws that God made, and when you do listen, you can't follow them perfectly. And if you don't follow all of the law, then following some of the law isn't good enough. That's not the way God goes. So what we have to do is allow grace to break in to the comfortable shell that we have, and grace breaks in with the mystery that says you can't do it all your way. And for us, the challenge at every moment in life, but the challenge this Advent in this place for us is to be able to allow grace to invade more deeply into the places in our hearts and our minds that we haven't let it speak before. So now we're the Magi, and I'm going to start actually at the beginning of chapter 2, verses 1 to 8. The specific text for this morning for second service is verses 9 to 12, which is what happens at the end. But I want to give the setup. So just a brief introduction. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem. That's how much we know about them. Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. When they opened their gifts and their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. So 3 guys show up seeking an answer to a mystery. And they're asking, where? They're asking, where? And when they start to get the information about where, then Herod asks back about the when. Tell me when this happened. So Herod is looking to solve a mystery, and the Magi are looking to explore a mystery. They want to do something that is absolutely profound. It's what we're called to do. And I think that the story of Magi give us a chance in Matthew's gospel to ask which side of this controversy are we on? Herod wants to solve the mystery because he needs to protect the status quo. His rulership in that time is coming to an end. He's had a good run, but there's starting to be some fraying in the fabric of his leadership. And he's a bit anxious, although he's been well respected and he's done a pretty decent job from the perspective of a political ruler. He's done some improvements, built some things in Jerusalem, and has a pretty good reputation, but it's falling apart. And so what he's looking to do is support the status quo. He wants to keep things the way they are, because after all, they're his things. How often have you and I done that same thing? How desperately do we fight to keep things from changing, especially around holidays and holiday traditions? I'll tell you honestly, it was hard for us as a family when we realized we could no longer have the major holidays at my mom's house in Michigan, because she just wasn't able to make that work. Wasn't going to work out for her. It was a longer distance for everybody else in the family, and she wasn't able to host it the way she wanted to. And it was a hard thing to do, to accept that we had to surrender that, driving that status quo. We do this at holiday. We try to drive the thing that has been so wonderful to us in the past, but when we do that, we don't let God's grace seep in. What we discovered was that in all of that, God moved our family here to Conneaut and gave us this colossal house. And all of a sudden, our kids, we can't make it happen in Michigan anymore, but now they want to make it happen together here. Now, those are not things that we could have seen, and I'm not claiming any great spiritual wisdom in all this. What I'm telling you is, looking back, my attempt to protect the status quo kept me from realizing the gift that was right in front of me, the opportunity that was right in front of me. So often, like Herod, we try to protect what we know, and we try to keep things from changing, and when we do that, we keep the mystery outside because we think of the scary part of mystery. But let's think this Christmas about the beautiful part of mystery, the part that gives us a certainty that there is going to be something that we don't understand. But what did the Magi want to do? They didn't want to protect the status quo. What were they looking to do? They were looking to do the most basic thing that we are called and created to do. It is the thing that distinguishes humanity from all the rest of creation, all of the animals and all of the world. We are the ones, we're the only ones that are called and created to enter into worship. The Magi came not to solve a mystery. They came because they recognized that the world was bigger than them, that what was out there to understand and experience was grander than anything they had understood or experienced in the past. They came because there was a God bigger than them, and that God had placed in human time, in human experience, God had placed a message. One who has been born King of the Jews. Folks, they weren't looking for a political candidate. They were recognizing that God had chosen to do something powerful through the Jewish people. And you can't get away from the history of the Jewish people. God's chosen people remain God's chosen people. And part of what the Magi see that the residents of Jerusalem don't see is that God's still acting through his people. The tragedy in the Magi is that they're the only ones in Jerusalem that are willing to explore the mystery that maybe this child, maybe this Messiah is going to be the game changer for Israel. Maybe this king, not a political king, not a military king, not a financial wizard, maybe this king, this Messiah, will restore the people's heart to God's heart. Maybe this is the chance, this is the Messiah, the chosen one, the opportunity to do that new thing that God said he is going to do, to show up powerfully in a real sense and do something that no one else has ever done, gotten the people to truly worship God and let go of all of their own agendas. That's a monumental task. The Magi come with a sense of wonder and discovery. And they enter into Jerusalem and they ask some questions and they're given some information and they go on and they discover the child and they worship. They discover the child and they worship. They don't allow the popular need to understand and to qualify and to codify and to make sure that if this is child, that if they're going to talk about this child born king of the Jews, what the heck? Herod, you're the king in the area. You should know about other kings, right? I mean, it makes complete sense that Herod might want to know about this, even if he wanted to pretend that he was simply wanting to welcome the new king into the kingdom. He's king, right? We all know that that's poppycock. We all know that what's really happening is a fear has taken over, a fear to protect the status quo, and all Jerusalem right along with him. Why? Because it appears that Jerusalem is finally successful. It appears that things are going to go pretty well. And these outsiders that come from some other place whose names we don't know and whose histories we don't know anything about and whose destiny after this event is completely lost to us as well. I mean, these are flash-in-the-pan magi. Literally, magic men. They come and they go. We don't see anything more about them. But they come in and they invade this space with this truth, this possibility that God is once again trying to work in our hearts to make a change. And they see that change and they worship that child. And then they do the most important thing that they could possibly do. They don't attempt to resolve the mystery. You see, the challenge that we sometimes miss here is they've gone to Jerusalem. They showed up as wise men, as guys that had information that nobody else had. And all of Jerusalem pays attention. And Herod says, listen, when you find the end of the story, when you get the rest of the story, when you finally have the ending, come back and tell us. And they could imagine that they would be celebrated. They would be geniuses. They would have the answer that the ruler of that area and all of Jerusalem wanted to hear. They had this special knowledge. And they got on their camels or horses or whatever they rode on. The point is, they didn't give in to the temptation to resolve the mystery. They listened to the leadership that God was giving them. And they went on about their way and went on about their lives and allowed that impact of that Christ child to be what it was. They came for the truth. They worshiped the truth. They left with the truth. The mystery is everything else. It's not easy, is it? To put yourself in the place of the Magi. It's easier to imagine Herod in Jerusalem, even shepherds, maybe not angels, at least not for me and Tom. We don't think about being angels too often. Shepherds maybe, but I don't know if I keep all the sheep going in the right direction or not. Maybe the innkeeper, yeah, perhaps. But think about being in the place of the Magi. Seeking a truth, experiencing that truth and worshiping, just worshiping. That's all they did. The gifts they gave were an act of worship. They were not a gift of favor. It's not like one dignitary gives to another dignitary when they enter in. It was an act of worship, a surrender, a devotion to a truth that was bigger than them. They accepted that truth, and they continued with the mystery of that truth and the power of that truth on with their lives. They didn't make history. They avoided making history by hanging on to the mystery. Think about that. Think about what it means for you and I, to step into the place of the Magi and allow God to be who God is and do what God does in this place, in this time, in your heart and in your life, and then to walk on with that in an act of worship and no more. In a minute, we're going to share in communion a meal that is as mysterious as anything we do can be, because in that meal, we believe that God visits us. In some ways, it's the incarnation again. In other ways, it's beyond our ability to describe. And if you wanted to test the elements, you would discover that they are, in fact, as they sit there, grape juice and bread, and probably at the end of the service, if you want to test them again, you might discover that they're still grape juice and bread. I don't care, because I know something happens that's beyond my ability to explain or describe or control more than anything else. And that God visits, that God shows up in an act of, if I allow the mystery of this meal to be an act of worship for me, if you allow it to be an act of worship for you, even if you're at home, even if this is 10 years down the road and you're seeing this service for the first time, doesn't matter. God's bigger than all the time and space that we might think gets in the way of what we do. God can still act, can still be a part of all that we are if we let him.